One more time. Let's try that again. Okay. Oh my God, and it just went live on this. Crazy town. Okay, well, you know what? We're not doing an intro today. We're not doing anything today. Everything's all sorts of messed up. I'm going to piece myself out. Sorry, guys. YouTube completely changed its go live dashboard. So everything is completely different on my end. I actually started the show and was a couple minutes into it and then realized we weren't even live yet. So this is a disaster. Thomas Moffat said earlier, ready to mute the celebration stream when you go live. And I think that's the nicest compliment anyone has ever given me. So thank you so much for that. Live now, says Nathaniel Wagner. Thank you, guys. You know, normally I like to go live on the title card and then play the intro and then come into things, but YouTube had other plans for me today. Oof, indeed, Christian Polson. But yes, we're here now, and it is Game of Thrones final season weekend. I feel like we've all been waiting for this for so long. I see... Who is it that jumped right into chat and said, Sansa must die? Jaroslav Z said, Sansa must die. I respectfully disagree with you. But we're going to start off with a non-spoilery kind of episode discussing Game of Thrones, and then we will hit a point where I will be like, hey, if you're not caught up, if you haven't finished season 7, get out of here now. But that is not this time. Right now, I just basically wanted to talk about Game of Thrones in general and how it came into my life and why I think it's such a good series. And if you're not watching it, why maybe you should be watching it. So that's where we're going to start off. And PSW says, boo, YouTube. It's okay. Celebration stream, says James Wyndham. Yeah, Star Wars celebration's going on right now. So Star Wars news everywhere. And Chris Lucier says, never seen it before about Game of Thrones. So if you're being serious and you've never seen it before, this is the perfect time for you to tune in. So I did a Naked Truth on Game of Thrones before a little while ago because it is something near and dear to my heart and something that has been for quite a long time. But this is the updated 2019 version. Yeah. So I say that it's been in my life for a really long time because I read the books before the series was even an idea, as far as any of us knew, at least. I read the books that were out when they were out. A friend of mine gave me the first book. The first time I was introduced to the first book was in college. I was doing an indie film over my summer break, and the director had a copy of the book and lent it to me. And I got a little ways in and then put it down and was like, yeah, I'm going to move on to other things. And then the second time the book was given to me, I was in a play out here in Los Angeles, and someone else in the play saw me reading probably a Dragonlance novel, but other fantasy literature, and was like, hey, you like fantasy literature? You're really going to like this one, and gave me the book. And I was like, oh man, I never finished this before, but I'm going to do it this time. And anyway, that was the right time for me because I read it through and I was hooked and it was lovely. Read the other books as soon as I could get my hands on them, and then obviously fell in love with the show when the show first came out. I also have played the Game of Thrones video games and board games, so the Telltale game series. And as far as board games, I have a card game. There's a couple different Game of Thrones licensed games. Some are better than others, but I have a few of them. I obviously am in love with the show. I think that they have done enough to be different from the books, yet enough to stay true to the spirit of what the books originated. And so I think they're two separate entities, and they both have their strengths and weaknesses, which is lovely. I strongly believe that this is one of those cases where you can't say, oh, the books are better or the TV show's better. I think, again, they both really have their own differentiating factors, why I would argue that you should consume both, and there is value to consuming both. I have way too many Game of Thrones collectibles. None, I don't think, that are behind me. I mean, the dragons on this side are kind of reminiscent of Thrones dragons for sure, or wyverns if we're going to be all, actually about it. Yeah, blow your mind. They're wyverns, not dragons. But that note aside, neither the books nor the show get that right. But I guess in the books you could imagine them to look like whatever they looked like. I don't know. In the show, they're totally wyverns. Anyway, I digress. What was I saying? Oh, decor. I have dragon egg soaps. I have decorative dragon eggs around my house. I have little dragons around my house, big dragons. You know, in my old apartment where I used to do the Naked Truth in my office, I had a big dragon shadow decal on the back wall. So it's obviously something I'm very in love with. I have collectible figures all over my house, on shelves all over my house, and I absolutely love it. I also have many t-shirts and dresses that are Game of Thrones, so many things. I love them all. It's really good. James Wisdom says that is exactly how book, TV, film adaptations should be done. Yes, exactly. I agree with you. The New Zealand Jester said, I had very few books that I read cover to cover. I had a few books that required dice to read and track your stats. Whoa, like a D&D choose your own adventure book? Send that to me, please. That sounds awesome. God of Knockers says I'm still on season 1 of Game of Thrones. Get through season 1. I think the reason that I started the first book multiple times and never finished it is because it wasn't until the actions that happen at the end of that first book and also at the end of season 1. Season 1 of the show and the first book are pretty parallel. It wasn't until then that I was really like, oh my God, I'm in love with this and I need more. So I urge you to stick through to the end of season 1. I had the opportunity to meet George R.R. Martin twice in my lifetime. Once at San Diego Comic-Con when I was cosplayed as Khaleesi, which I wanted to have the picture to pull up and show you guys. So I'll put it in my Instagram stories if you want to see it as soon as we're done here. But yeah, I got to meet him once at Comic-Con and when I was cosplaying Daenerys Targaryen as the Khaleesi, because this was a few years back. And I also met him when I was doing some magician's assistant work with my good friend Misty Lee, who if you watch Game Engine, you would have seen her on there. She's a video game voiceover actress as well, and animated series voiceover actress, but she's also a magician, and I was her assistant for many, many years before I had Logan, and then it got too dangerous when I was pregnant. But anyway, we did a show at George R.R. Martin's theater in Santa Fe, and at the end of our weekend run of his show, we went out to dinner with him. So then I had the opportunity to go out to dinner with George R.R. Martin, which was so cool. Chris Van Dusen did a super chat, $10. Thank you so much. And said, important question. Who does your loyalty lie with? The North, the Mother of Dragons, or the Lannisters? If it's with the Lannisters, then I'm afraid we cannot be friends. I'm sorry. First of all, thank you so much for supporting this channel with a super chat. You are awesome. Naked Truths almost always get demonetized, and I just expect that they will. But anyway, so I appreciate your super chat. Thank you so much. And who does my loyalty lie with? It's very hard to say at this point in time. I would say my loyalty is evenly split between the North and Daenerys Targaryen, the Mother of Dragons. And so later in this episode, when we get into the spoiler territory, then I will explain why a little bit more. Yay! Yes, we're talking Game of Thrones today, Tyler boys. Woo! So yeah, I mean, in general, why this series is so good, and I believe why this franchise has captured so many people's attention, is because they do a really great job. George in the books and the showrunners and the directors in the show do a really good job of not painting 99% of the characters as completely good or completely evil, because that's not the way the real world is. And I think it appeals to us as the audience members in that reality. So nothing is black and white. I mean, the villains have redeeming moments. The good guys have very villainous moments, and that it's all very, very complex morally and gray. And there's a really great scene later in the series, the episode that Ed Sheeran is in, if you remember that scene that he's in. And again, I'm not going to be spoilery, but there's a scene that he's in that really shows one of our main characters that even though technically we think certain people are the bad guys, that really it's very humanizing, and that war has, like I said, lots of moral complexities to it. And I think the show does that very, very well, to the point where now we find ourselves cheering for characters that were really quite horrendous in the very beginning of the show. So crazy how that happens. I also think that it's very appealing in that there are badass male and female characters. So it's not something that's, like, people aren't going to say, oh, it's virtue signaling because it's all women. And I don't think people are going to say it's being exclusive because it's all men. I think gender equality is pretty prevalent on this show, and in all different types of stereotypes. Or I should say counteracting stereotypes, which is really cool to see. There's tons of political intrigue. So if you're someone who likes, say, the show House of Cards, and you're into the kind of mental chess game that goes on behind the scenes, this series does that better than any other series that I think I've seen. So yes, it's a fantasy series. Yes, there's magic in it, but it's tons of more realistic political intrigue. And in fact, the first season of the show deals 90% of the time with the political intrigue. And because that's so grounded in the reality we know, when there is any kind of magic or theology incorporated into it, I feel like as an audience, we're a lot more apt to buy into that and be cool with it. I know there's a lot of people that aren't necessarily people who live in the fantasy world with their entertainment that would kind of look at Game of Thrones as an outsider and say, oh, like dragons and that's not for me. That's not for me. And I think the first season does a really good job of drawing in those people especially, which is cool. Kind of like I feel like Star Wars does a great job of drawing in people who may not traditionally consider themselves sci-fi fans. Game of Thrones, I feel like, does that for fantasy, which is great. They deal with a ton of theology and philosophy, and as someone who is a theology and philosophy nerd, that appeals to me. There's all different gods and pantheons that can be worshipped within this world, and you're constantly questioning which of them are hacks, which of them are real, are all of them real, what does that mean? We see people whose philosophies may align with our own personal philosophies, and then how that doesn't work out for them in the series, and that makes us question our own philosophy. And I love entertainment that does that. It's so good. And I feel like when you're watching it or reading the books, you're kind of playing the game with them. You're trying to figure it out and outsmart the characters as you go. And that makes you, as an audience member, involved in the show and involved in the process. So that is my, that is my, if you're not watching Game of Thrones, here are the reasons I think you should be watching Game of Thrones, and that I think you would enjoy it. So that's my plug for that. And then now I want to get into some more spoilery specific stuff by asking you guys in chat some questions. So if you are not caught up to season 8 and you are concerned about spoilers, now is the time to exit this episode. I love you so much. Thank you for watching. Join the Discord and all that good stuff. And if you do happen to get caught up before and want to hang along, me and Sam Basher and DJ Woldridge are doing an after recap show after every single episode. It'll come out on Mondays. Follow their new social channel, Might Be Awesome. It's going to be there on YouTube, and I'll playlist it on this channel as well. Okay, so bye people that are worried about spoilers if you're not caught up. Season 8 hasn't started yet at the time this video is starting, so you have to have watched through to the end of season 7 if you want to continue watching. Okay, cool. I feel like that's enough of a spoiler alert. So bye, Chris. See you later. What season comes out tomorrow, says James. Season 8. Season 8 starts tomorrow, and I am very excited. Yes. Tyler Boyce is talking theology, and he said that I love how people confuse the 7 as 7 gods instead of one God with 7 faces. Yeah, it's like being confused by the Trinity in the Middle Ages. Exactly. David says, Sheldon, I prefer the many-faced God. Just me, of course. And then, of course, there's the Lord of Light. So, sure, let's start off with this question. Of the various theologies in the world of Game of Thrones, which do you think is the most powerful, and why? That's my question, because I feel like we have had proof that each of the different deities Oh, hey, Garivian says, first time actually making one of these live. Hi. I feel like we've had proof that each of the deities have some kind of power for the most part. And who is more powerful? Or are they all of equal power and, vying for followers in the same world? Or is it one of those situations kind of like American Gods where the more followers you have believing in you, the more powerful you are? I don't know. I do not know. Oh, Sheldon says, I'm not saying I prefer them. Okay. And yeah, the bank says, oh, Steve, you know what? That's the final answer. The bank is the god, the Iron Bank. Okay, next question for everybody. Who do you think is going to die first in the new season? I heard on the news that some students had created an artificial intelligence program that runs a whole bunch of numbers to predict who will sit the Iron Throne and who has the highest chance of dying. And the artificial intelligence said that Bronn had the highest chance of going next, and that Daenerys had the highest chance of surviving the longest and therefore potentially sitting on the Iron Throne. But who's gonna die first? I think that we might lose. I think there's a bunch of people we're going to lose this season, but who do I think is going to go first? Big question. I'm waiting to hear your answers before I spoil mine, because I think that Bronn has a high chance, and I think that's going to hurt. I think that the Onion Knight, Sir Davos Seaworth, has a high chance, and that's going to hurt. I think Lovely Magic Pegacorn says first, a Stark, but not sure which one, but one of them. You think we're going to lose a Stark? No. Well, we started off the show with someone saying Sansa's going to die, so maybe. Garivian says, I say Dany's kid. Solid chance. I definitely think that she's preggo, and we're going to know this in this season. But Miri Mazdur was like, you'll never have children. But I liked John's line about, like, this is the same one that said she was going to save your husband and then killed him. Yeah, maybe she's not the most reliable source of info. So maybe. Tyler Boyce says first to die this season. Maybe Tormund. Oh, Mr. Theory Fournier says Grey Worm, Jorah, and Brienne. Oh, I hope that Brienne doesn't go, but I think you're right. I think Grey Worm and Jorah stand a chance. James Wisdom says, I hope Sansa dies. Why do you hope Sansa dies? I heard a really good theory that Sansa is going to be the one who ends up sitting the throne. And it had some good stuff behind it. It was DJ's theory, I believe. Brian says Jorah will sacrifice himself for Dany. That would be a good way to go for Jorah, for sure. There are so many Starks. It's a miracle they've lived so long. Well, most of them haven't lived. Let's remember that. Yeah, I really like Sansa's character arc up until this point in the show. I think that she has, to grow up with the idea of life is perfect and wonderful, and I'm going to marry a prince and become a queen and live happily ever after, and kind of being a bit of a spoiled brat in that sense, to have to go through what she's gone through and still keep her wits about her, not enough to kind of turn into a reek type character, but to be observant and learn from it and learn the different strategic moves that she would need from a Cersei, from a Peter Baelish. I think she's doing real well. I think she knows how to play the game now, which is cool. Steve says she's a really strong woman. James Wisdom says she irritates me. All right, fair enough. Different strokes. But I think that she is a really cool character, to see how she's changed at this point. Let's see. Do you guys have any favorite fan theories that are out there? Some of the more popular fan theories that are out there going into season 8 include that Bran is the Night King is a very popular one. If you look at the changes in the Night King's face as the series went along, he does resemble Bran's face more now, particularly in the nose. And that theory says that Bran would have traveled back in time to become the first man that was originally changed into the Night King to try to prevent everything, but then got stuck in that body. But that would also mean that Bran needs to coexist simultaneously in two, like his psyche needs to coexist simultaneously in two different timelines, and that brings in all the time travel loophole stuff that I absolutely hate. So I hope that's not the case. Let's see. Also, there was a theory going forever, and I think this was mostly from book readers, less from show watchers, that Tyrion is a secret Targaryen, and I have always loved that theory. But people say that that theory's been debunked because Peter Dinklage said something in an interview once that Jaime was most definitely his real brother, and then people were like, oh, that theory is debunked. I don't think that that debunks that theory. I don't know for sure that Peter Dinklage knew. We'll see. Niam Run says Littlefinger isn't dead is my favorite theory. What is that theory? Please tell me what that theory is. I would love to hear more about that. There's also theories about maybe Arya's not really Arya. It's someone else wearing Arya's face, which would be a really interesting twist because I was never comfortable with the way that Arya never completed her training yet still retained the ability to wear many faces. Yeah. Brian Von Soffel says, I want to see Bran Warg the undead dragon. Oh, man. That'd be crazy, especially if he could, like, convince the undead dragon to do something. Seth SSD says, I buy into the Bran theory. Would be the least predictable of anything else. Maybe. Jeff Dumas says, honestly, I just want Missandei to live. I love Missandei. Melisandre's totally going to die. She told us I'm going to come back before I die here, so we know that. Christian Paulson says, Littlefinger's going to sit the Iron Throne. Don't at me. You know, I would have said you were right before this last season, for sure. Because he did so well. Xander Cree says, kudos to those reading the books and watching the show at the same time. Must be confusing. It is confusing. Like, for me, the two storylines kind of intermingle into one story. Like, I think I just picked the stuff that I liked the best from either and kind of made my own timeline and story. But that's really fun to do in and of itself. Okay. And here's my final question to you guys for today's stream. If only, I think most people think that Daenerys or Jon are going to take the Iron Throne, or that they're going to get married and take it together. I think that's like the most popular theory. If only Jon or Dany can sit the Iron Throne, who would you choose of those two? Who would you choose? Garth McMurray says, there's the theory that Littlefinger died in the battle he was wounded in, and the one we know is one of the faceless men in disguise. That's interesting. I wonder why that would happen. Okay. Jarius Howard gave a $2 super chat. Thank you so much. And said, how are you doing, Trisha? I'm doing very well. Today's a little bit of a crazy day for me. YouTube changed the settings and I had a lot going on, but I'm here now and I'm good. Let's see. Niam says Dany. If it's between Dany and Jon. Here come the votes. They're starting to come in. Niam says Dany. Tyler Boyce says Jon will sacrifice himself so that Daenerys can defeat the Night King. That's a good theory. Lots of Daenerys. Everyone's going Daenerys. Oh, man. Pierre Kelly gave a $1 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. You rule. Okay, so everyone's in the Daenerys camp. I mean, Jon has said many times that he does not want to rule. DJ's theory, which if you guys want to check out, might be awesome with me and Sam and DJ. You can hear more about this and episode breakdowns after each episode. But I think it was DJ's theory that was Jon would sit the throne, that Daenerys might die in the battle. Jon would sit the throne, but because he doesn't want to rule, he would hand it off to Sansa since she now knows how to play the game so well from everything she's been through, which I thought was interesting. Jeff Dumas says, Jon, sort of, but Dany, if she reigns in her slightly blind quest for power above all else. Yeah, Daenerys has gone more on the I might be the villain now route. When we rooted for her so hard in the beginning. And again, I love how this show does this. It's so good. So she might be inheriting some of the typical mad Targaryen attributes that we hear about and read about. He would also be a real crap king, says that James Wisdom. Right? You have to agree. Sansa would probably be a better ruler than Jon. I don't know. Garivian says, since everyone else says Daenerys, I say Jon. That's a good way to be. Brian says, I think John's more likely to sacrifice himself for the kingdom than Dany. Maybe. GK Gamer Fan says, DJ Wooldridge. Yes, that's exactly how you spell it. Good job. Cyclops says, do another Naked Truth on Avengers Endgame. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I should definitely do that, Cyclops. All right, well, with that, I actually have to run out. I have something I have to be at in less than an hour, so I gotta, put some clothes on and get out the door. It's generally frowned upon if you leave your house without clothes on. So I'm going to go do that now. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in. Happy Game of Thronesing this weekend. Thank you to Garth McMurray for the $2 super chat and says, my money is on Samwell taking the Iron Throne. That would be the underdog victory for sure. Yes, happy Thronesing, everyone. I am probably going to have to wait until after a little man goes to bed to watch it because he's old enough to understand the images he would see on the screen. So I will be like social media dark from 6 p.m. Pacific time because that's when it goes live online until I actually get to watch it after his bedtime. But I will be fired up on Twitter after that, and then you'll be able to watch the discussion on Might Be Awesome the next day. So thank you guys so much, and I will talk to you later. Thank you. Let's see if I can figure out how to end the stream with these new settings. Haha, good times. All right, bye everybody.